Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the final transmission from the Galactic Council fade into static across his command screens. The holographic image of Chancellor Vextar towered above the communication console, his crystalline form reflecting the cold light of distant stars as he delivered humanity's sentence, with the kind of finality that ended civilizations. The Jelani Empire's representative spoke with a voice that sounded like breaking glass, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum humiliation on the species that had dared to challenge galactic order. Behind Vextar, the assembled council members from dozens of alien species nodded their approval. Their various forms united in their decision to cast humanity into the darkness between stars. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Council, Vextar announced his translation device, converting his crystalline harmonics into words that burned themselves into Morrison's memory. Humanity is hereby expelled from all galactic communication networks, trade routes, and diplomatic relations effective immediately. Morrison felt his crew tense around him as the weight of those words settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Lieutenant Sarah Kim at the communication station tried desperately to maintain contact with other human vessels scattered throughout Council space, but the alien networks were already cutting them off one by one. Your species has proven too volatile, too unpredictable, too dangerous for civilized space, the Chancellor continued, his tone carrying the satisfaction of someone who believed he was solving a long-standing problem. Your aggressive expansion, your refusal to follow established protocols, your constant disruption of peaceful trade agreements, and your barbaric approach to conflict resolution have made coexistence impossible. The charges were not entirely unfair, Morrison admitted to himself as he watched his tactical officer update the ship's status displays. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 15 years earlier, and those 15 years had been marked by constant friction between human ambition and alien caution. Humans approached problems with a directness that terrified species who had spent millennia developing elaborate diplomatic procedures for even the simplest decisions. Where the Council preferred lengthy negotiations and careful consensus building, humans wanted immediate action and clear results. The cultural clash had been inevitable from the moment humanity left their solar system and encountered the broader galactic community. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice crackled through the ship's communication system from her flagship 3 light minutes away, her words carrying the frustration and anger that every human in the fleet was feeling. All ships, maintain formation and prepare for immediate withdrawal from Council space. We are no longer welcome here, but we will leave with our dignity intact. The irony was not lost on Morrison that humanity's greatest military leader was being forced to retreat, not because of defeat in battle, but because of political maneuvering by species who feared direct confrontation. The Council had tried, for years, to find ways to limit human expansion and influence without risking the kind of open warfare that humans excelled at. Dr. Kevin Hayes, the fleet's chief science officer, moved to stand beside Morrison's command chair as the final details of humanity's exile were broadcast to every human vessel in Council space. Hayes had spent his career studying alien cultures and biology, but his expertise had not been enough to bridge the gap between human nature and galactic expectations. They think isolation will break us, Hayes said quietly, his voice barely audible over the bridge's background noise. They have no idea what they've just unleashed. Chancellor Vextar's image continued to dominate the main view screen as he outlined the specific terms of humanity's banishment. All human colonies outside the Sol system would be evacuated within 6 standard months. Human trading licenses would be revoked immediately. Access to galactic communication networks, navigation databases, and technological exchanges would be terminated permanently. Furthermore, Vextar announced with obvious satisfaction, any human vessel detected outside your home system after the evacuation period will be considered a hostile force and dealt with accordingly. Your species will remain within the boundaries of Sol until such time as you can demonstrate the kind of civilized behavior that galactic society requires. The transmission included a list of humanity's supposed crimes that read like a catalog of everything that made humans different from the other species in the galaxy. Humans negotiated too aggressively, expanded too rapidly, fought too viciously when threatened, and refused to accept the careful limitations that kept galactic civilization stable and predictable. Morrison understood that, from the aliens' perspective, humanity represented chaos in a universe that had achieved a delicate balance through millions of years of cautious cooperation. Human traders ignored established protocols, human diplomats made demands instead of requests, and human military forces responded to threats with overwhelming violence rather than measured retaliation. The evacuation began immediately as human ships throughout Council space received their orders to return home. Merchant vessels abandoned profitable trade routes, diplomatic missions packed their belongings and departed embassy worlds, and military patrols withdrew from sectors they had helped to protect. Captain Morrison watched the tactical display show, human ships converging on predetermined rally points before beginning their long journey back to Earth. Each departing vessel represented years of effort to establish humanity's place in galactic civilization, all of it now abandoned because of fundamental differences that no amount of diplomacy could resolve. The worst part of the evacuation was the speed with which former allies distanced themselves from humanity. Species that had benefited from human protection and trade partnerships now refused to acknowledge previous agreements or provide assistance to departing human personnel. The message was clear. Associating with the exiled species would bring Council displeasure. As the UES Defiance joined the growing convoy of human ships heading toward the edge of Council space, Morrison reflected on how completely their situation had changed in the space of a single transmission. Hours earlier, humanity had been a rising power in galactic politics with colonies spanning dozens of systems and influence that grew stronger every year. Now they were refugees in their own galaxy, forced to abandon everything they had built and return to the solar system that had once seemed too small to contain human ambitions. The Council believed they had solved the human problem by removing humanity from the galactic stage, but Morrison suspected they had instead created something far more dangerous. Admiral Carter's final transmission to the fleet came as they crossed the boundary marker that separated Council space from the vast emptiness beyond. "Remember this moment," her voice carried to every human ship in the convoy. "Remember how it felt to be cast out by those who feared our strength. When we return, and we will return, they will understand the true meaning of that fear." Commander Sam Taylor walked through the corridors of Luna Base 7, watching his engineers work with pieces of alien technology that most species in the galaxy had never even seen. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council cut humanity off from the rest of the universe, and those 5 years had changed everything. Dr. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her workstation where she was carefully taking apart a Jelani crystal matrix. Her team had been working on this particular piece for 3 months, learning how the crystalline beings channeled energy through their technology. The work was slow and dangerous, but they were making progress that surprised even her. "Sam, you need to see this," she called out, her voice filled with excitement. "We figured out how they make their energy flow through these crystals, but here's the interesting part. Our way is actually better." Taylor moved closer to examine her work. The human-modified crystal was glowing brighter than any Council technology he had ever seen. Where the original design used complex pathways to guide energy, Rodriguez and her team had simplified the process using human engineering principles. The result was not just more efficient, it was revolutionary. "How much more powerful is it?" Taylor asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer would be impressive. "About 3 times more energy output with half the materials," Rodriguez replied with a grin that told him this was just the beginning. "And that's just our first attempt. We think we can do even better." Across the solar system, similar breakthroughs were happening in dozens of hidden facilities. On Mars, Dr. Kevin Hayes was working with biological samples from various Council species, learning how different alien physiologies worked. His research was helping humanity understand not just how to fight these species, but how to defend against their unique abilities. Lieutenant Colonel Rick Barnes supervised the weapons development programs from a facility buried deep beneath the Martian surface. The Council had regulations about what kinds of weapons member species could develop, but humanity was no longer bound by those rules. Barnes and his team were creating weapons that would have horrified the peaceful council members. The railgun tests are exceeding all expectations, Barnes reported to Admiral Lisa Carter during their daily briefing. We can now fire projectiles at velocities that would punch through any council ship's defenses, and the new plasma cannon designs are ready for field testing. Carter nodded as she reviewed the reports. Each day brought new advances that reminded her why the council had feared humanity in the first place. Humans approached problems differently than other species. Where most aliens followed established procedures and traditional methods, humans experimented, improvised, and found solutions that no one else had considered. The isolation that was meant to weaken humanity was actually making them stronger in ways the council could never have imagined. Without access to alien technology, humans were forced to innovate. Without diplomatic restrictions, they were free to develop whatever weapons and defenses they needed. Without council oversight, they could pursue research that other species considered too dangerous or unethical. Dr. Susan Blake was leading humanity's most ambitious project yet, developing faster-than-light travel that did not rely on council jump gates. Her team had been studying the quantum mechanics behind alien FTL technology, but instead of copying it, they were creating something entirely new. Traditional jump gate technology requires massive infrastructure and careful calibration, Blake explained to the research committee. Our approach will allow individual ships to create their own temporary wormholes using onboard generators. The power requirements are enormous, but we think we can manage it with our improved energy systems. The project was dangerous and expensive, but it represented something that no other species had achieved: complete independence from galactic infrastructure. If Blake's team succeeded, human ships would be able to travel anywhere in the galaxy without using council-controlled jump gates or following established trade routes. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Paul Martinez was coordinating humanity's military expansion throughout the solar system. Every moon, asteroid, and space station was being fortified and armed. The official reason was defense, but Martinez knew they were really preparing for something much more ambitious. We're not just building defenses, Martinez told his staff during a classified briefing. We're building launching points. When the time comes, we'll be ready to move fast and strike hard. The military preparations were impressive, but they were only part of humanity's transformation. Dr. Helen Wright was revolutionizing space construction techniques, finding ways to build larger and more complex structures, using materials that the council had dismissed as worthless. Human engineering was proving that many supposedly inferior materials could be superior when used correctly. Captain Danny Foster was testing the first human ships designed entirely without alien technology. These vessels were faster, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed than anything humanity had possessed during their brief membership in the Council. More importantly, they were completely invisible to Council sensors because they used technology that alien science could not detect or understand. The stealth systems are working perfectly, Foster reported after a successful test flight to the edge of the solar system. Council monitoring stations showed no sign of us. As far as their instruments were concerned, empty space flew past their sensors. The breakthrough in stealth technology was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement during the silent years. By studying how Council sensors worked and developing technology that operated on different principles, human engineers had created vessels that were essentially invisible to alien detection methods. Intelligence reports from the few remaining human agents in Council space confirmed that the aliens had no idea what humanity was doing. Most Council members assumed that the isolated humans were struggling to survive without galactic technology and support. Some even predicted that humanity would eventually beg to be readmitted to the Council as a subordinate species. Those predictions could not have been more wrong. Every day that passed saw humanity growing stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. The species that had once been dismissed as too chaotic and unpredictable was using those same qualities to develop capabilities that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen. Dr. Carol Murphy, who was coordinating diplomatic preparations for humanity's eventual return to galactic politics, knew that when that day came, the Council would face a very different humanity than the one they had expelled. The question was not whether humans would rejoin galactic civilization, but on what terms. As the 5th year of isolation drew to a close, Commander Taylor stood in his command center watching reports flow in from across the solar system. Every facility, every research project, every military installation was exceeding expectations. Humanity had not just survived their punishment, they had used it to become something unprecedented in galactic history. The Council had made a critical error when they assumed isolation would weaken humanity. Instead, it had given them the freedom and motivation to become everything the aliens had feared they could be. Captain Danny Foster gripped the command chair of the UES Pioneer as his ship prepared to make humanity's first independent jump to interstellar space. 7 years had passed since the Council's exile, and today marked the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The ship around him hummed with technology that no alien species had ever imagined possible. Dr. Susan Blake watched her control panels from the engineering station, monitoring the quantum field generators that made this moment possible. Her breakthrough in faster-than-light travel had taken 3 years of dangerous experimentation, but the results were beyond anything she had hoped for. Human ships could now travel between stars without using Council jump gates or following any established routes. All systems are green, Blake reported to Foster. The quantum tunnel is stable and ready for activation. Foster nodded and gave the order that would begin humanity's secret expansion into the galaxy. Engage the drive. Space twisted around the Pioneer as it slipped through dimensions that Council science said were impossible to navigate. Within seconds, the ship emerged in the Kepler 442 system, over 20 light-years from Earth. No Council monitoring station detected their arrival because human stealth technology made them invisible to alien sensors. The system they entered was supposedly empty according to Council records, but human long-range sensors immediately detected something interesting. 3 planets in the habitable zone showed signs of valuable mineral deposits, and the 4th planet had an atmosphere that could be modified for human habitation with the right terraforming techniques. General Paul Martinez received Foster's report 12 hours later when the Pioneer returned to Earth. The successful test meant that humanity's expansion plan could finally begin in earnest. Martinez had been preparing for this moment for 2 years, assembling teams of colonists, engineers, and military personnel who were ready to establish humanity's first secret colonies. "We start with 12 systems," Martinez announced to his senior staff during a classified briefing on Luna. "Each colony ship will carry everything needed to establish a fully functional settlement within 6 months. Our goal is not just survival, but dominance." Dr. Helen Wright had revolutionized terraforming technology during humanity's isolation, developing techniques that could transform hostile worlds into thriving colonies faster than anyone thought possible. Her methods were aggressive and efficient, using controlled nuclear explosions to jumpstart atmospheric changes and genetically modified organisms to rapidly establish stable ecosystems. The Council takes decades to terraform a world because they follow safety protocols and environmental guidelines, Wright explained to the Colonial Planning Committee. "We can do it in months because we're willing to take risks and use methods they consider too dangerous." Captain Chris Williams commanded the first wave of colony ships that departed Earth 6 months later. His fleet of 20 vessels carried 30,000 volunteers to 4 different star systems, each chosen for its strategic value and resource potential. The ships were invisible to Council sensors and carried enough supplies to establish permanent settlements. The first human colony outside the solar system was established on a world Williams named New Dakota, a planet with vast iron and titanium, deposits that would become the foundation of humanity's interstellar manufacturing base. The colonists worked with determination that amazed even Williams, building mining facilities and habitation domes with speed that would have seemed impossible to the Council species. Dr. Michelle Green led the scientific surveys of each new world, cataloging resources and identifying opportunities that the Council's more cautious approach had missed. Her teams found deposits of rare elements that alien surveys had overlooked, sometimes because they were in locations that other species considered too dangerous to mine. The Jelani surveyed this system 200 years ago and classified it as mineral poor, Green reported from the colony that would become known as New Pittsburgh. They were wrong. This planet has enough rare earth metals to supply human industry for centuries. They just didn't look in the right places. The expansion continued at a pace that would have terrified the Council if they had known about it. Every 3 months, another wave of colony ships departed Earth carrying more settlers to new worlds. Human technology allowed them to establish colonies in environments that other species avoided, from high radiation worlds near pulsars to planets with extreme gravity or toxic atmospheres. Lieutenant Colonel Rick Barnes coordinated the military aspects of the expansion, ensuring that every colony was also a fortress capable of defending itself and supporting offensive operations. Human colonies were not just settlements. They were strategic bases that could launch raids against Council shipping or serve as supply points for deeper penetration into alien space. Each colony is designed to be self-sufficient within 1 year, Barnes explained to the Defense Committee. After that, they become net contributors to our military capabilities. We're not just expanding, we're building the foundation for total galactic dominance. The most ambitious colonies were established in systems that the Council actively used but did not fully control. Human settlements on resource-rich worlds in the outer territories began quietly mining valuable materials while remaining completely hidden from alien detection. Council trade convoys passed through these systems regularly, never knowing that human observers were tracking their movements and learning their patterns. Admiral Tony Clark took command of the deep space operations that pushed human expansion into increasingly bold territory. His task forces established monitoring stations near major Council trade routes, gathering intelligence about alien military capabilities and economic activities. The information they collected revealed weaknesses in Council defenses that would prove crucial in later operations. The aliens have grown complacent, Clark reported to Earth Command after 6 months of deep space reconnaissance. Their security is based on the assumption that no hostile force can operate in their territory without using their infrastructure. They're completely unprepared for an enemy that can appear anywhere without warning. The intelligence gathered by Clark's forces revealed that the Council's power was more fragile than anyone had realized. Their civilization depended on predictable trade routes, established communication networks, and standardized technology. They had no experience dealing with an opponent who could ignore all those systems and operate completely independently. Dr. Kevin Hayes established research stations in several systems to study alien life forms and ecosystems without Council knowledge. His teams collected biological samples and conducted experiments that would have violated numerous Council treaties, developing weapons and defenses based on detailed knowledge of alien physiology. By the end of the 7th year, humanity had established over 50 hidden colonies across 12 sectors of space. Each settlement was thriving and growing, contributing to humanity's expanding industrial base and military capabilities. The Council remained completely unaware that the species they had exiled was building an empire in the darkness between their worlds. Captain Foster, now promoted to Commodore, stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the latest colony ships depart for even more distant systems. Humanity's expansion showed no signs of slowing down, and each new world made them stronger and more capable of challenging the aliens who had tried to contain them. Prime Christarch Nulvani stood in the Emergency Council chamber, watching the holographic displays show the impossible. 15 years had passed since the Galactic Council had expelled humanity from civilized space, and those 15 years should have been peaceful and prosperous for the remaining species. Instead, the galaxy was falling apart in ways that made no sense. The mining world of Kethmaran had been stripped completely bare overnight. 3 billion tons of trilithium crystals had vanished, without any trace of how or who had taken them. Security recordings showed the mining complex operating normally one day, then completely empty the next morning. No ships had been detected entering or leaving the system. No energy signatures that indicated any kind of industrial operation. Chancellor Vextar's replacement stared at the reports flowing in from across Jelani space. Similar incidents were happening everywhere, but the pattern made no logical sense. Valuable resources were disappearing from heavily guarded facilities, industrial complexes were suffering mysterious system failures, and entire cargo convoys were vanishing between Jump points without sending any distress signals. This cannot be natural phenomena, Nolvani announced to the assembled council representatives. Someone or something is systematically targeting our most valuable assets, but our sensors detect nothing. Admiral Kexhai of the Vortaki Federation shared equally disturbing reports from his territory. 3 major shipbuilding facilities had suffered catastrophic failures in the past month, with explosions that destroyed years of work and killed thousands of technicians. The explosions appeared to originate from within the facilities themselves, but investigators could find no evidence of sabotage or structural weakness. Our engineering teams have examined the wreckage extensively, Kexhai reported with obvious frustration in his translator's voice. The destruction patterns suggest some kind of advanced explosive device, but we cannot identify any technology capable of causing this level of damage while remaining completely undetectable. The Empress of the Azure Reach spoke next, her crystalline voice carrying notes of genuine fear. Her battle fleets had encountered invisible obstacles that disabled entire squadrons without warning. Ships would suddenly lose power, life support would fail, and crew members would report seeing strange energy discharges that their sensors could not detect or analyze. My most experienced captains describe attacks that seem to come from empty space, the Empress reported. Weapons fire that appears from nowhere, ships that materialize just long enough to strike and then vanish again. Our military analysts believe we are facing technology that operates on principles we do not understand. Dr. Zethara, the Council's leading scientist, had been studying the incidents for months without finding any reasonable explanation. Her research teams had analyzed hundreds of reports, examined physical evidence from dozens of sites, and consulted with experts from every member species. The conclusion was both obvious and terrifying. The pattern suggests coordinated attacks by a technologically superior force, Zethara announced to the stunned council chamber. Someone with capabilities far beyond our current understanding is systematically weakening our infrastructure and military strength. The council members looked at each other with growing alarm as the implications became clear. No known species possessed technology advanced enough to remain completely invisible while conducting large-scale operations across multiple sectors of space. The attack showed knowledge of council security procedures, military tactics, and industrial processes that suggested extensive intelligence gathering over many years. Prime Christarch Nolvani called for increased security patrols and defensive measures throughout council space, but privately she feared they were dealing with something beyond their ability to combat. The attackers, whoever they were, seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage while avoiding any direct confrontation that might reveal their identity. The mystery deepened when Admiral Tony Clark's task force appeared at the edge of Jelani space without any advance warning. Council sensors detected the human ship suddenly, as if they had materialized from nothingness. The vessels showed energy signatures that defied everything the aliens understood about physics and engineering. I am Admiral Clark of the Human Colonial Defense Force. The transmission reached every council facility simultaneously, somehow penetrating their most secure communication networks. We have been watching you. We have been learning from your mistakes. We have been growing stronger while you grew weaker. The shock of hearing from humanity after 15 years of silence was nothing compared to the horror of understanding what they were seeing. The human ships displayed technology that seemed impossible according to established scientific principles. Their hulls absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them. Their weapons charged with energy that made stellar cores seem dim by comparison, and their mere presence caused distortions in space-time that Council instruments could barely measure. Behind Admiral Clark, the Council detection systems registered energy signatures from hundreds of additional human vessels scattered throughout the system. Ships that had been invisible moments before now revealed themselves in a display of technological superiority that left no doubt about their capabilities. Dr. Michelle Green's voice joined the transmission from Earth, carrying with it data streams that penetrated every Council computer system simultaneously. You taught us that isolation was punishment. Her words echoed through chambers across the galaxy. You forgot that isolation is also evolution. The data Green transmitted contained detailed intelligence about every Council military installation, trade route, and strategic resource. Information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain showed that they had been monitoring galactic civilization for years without anyone detecting their presence. Prime Kristark Nulvani realized with growing terror that the mysterious attacks, the vanishing resources, and the system failures had all been human operations. The species the Council had dismissed as too chaotic and primitive had spent 15 years becoming something that surpassed every other civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Clark's final transmission made their situation clear beyond any possibility of misunderstanding. "You have 36 hours to prepare your surrender," he announced with calm certainty. "We will accept nothing less than complete submission to human authority. Your era of galactic dominance is over." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in stunned silence as the full scope of their miscalculation became apparent. They had not contained humanity's threat to galactic stability. They had given that threat 15 years to grow into something unstoppable. Around them, reports continued flowing in of human fleets emerging from stealth near every major Council world. Ships that numbered in the thousands, carrying weapons that could destroy entire planets and operated by the species that had just announced their intention to rule the galaxy. The Council that had once expelled humanity for being too dangerous now faced the consequences of their decision as the isolated species returned to claim dominion over their former judges. Fleet Admiral Chris Williams stood on the command deck of the UES Dominator, watching the massive human fleet take position around the Council's capital world. 20 years had passed since humanity's exile, and those 20 years had transformed them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Around him, 3,000 human vessels displayed technology that made the Council's most advanced ships look like ancient relics. The same chamber that had once expelled humanity now trembled as alien leaders gathered for what they knew would be their final meeting as the galaxy's ruling power. Prime Kristark Nulvani looked at the holographic displays showing human dreadnoughts surrounding their homeworld, weapons charged with energy that could crack planets in half. Chancellor Vextar, who had delivered humanity's original sentence of exile, now knelt before the holographic projection of Admiral Williams. The proud crystalline being who had once dismissed humans as too chaotic for civilized space was now begging for mercy from the species he had tried to contain. "Please," Vextar's voice cracked through his translation device. "We understand now that we made a terrible mistake. The galaxy needs humanity's strength and innovation. Our defenses are failing, our technology has grown stagnant, and our colonies are struggling without the energy and determination that only humans possess." Williams listened to the desperate pleas with the cold patience of someone who had spent 2 decades preparing for this moment. Behind him, Captain Ben Turner monitored the defensive systems of every Council world, watching their pathetic attempts to organize resistance against human forces that could strike from impossible angles and vanish before retaliation was possible. Dr. Carol Murphy stepped forward from her position as Earth's new Secretary of Galactic Affairs, carrying with her the terms that would reshape the galaxy forever. Her research during the isolation years had focused on understanding the weaknesses of every Council species, their cultural pressures, economic dependencies, and military limitations. "You isolated us because you feared our unpredictability," Murphy announced to the assembled alien leaders. "You were correct to fear it, but you failed to understand that our chaos was not weakness. It was strength waiting to be refined." The terms she presented were not negotiations. They were demands. Backed by overwhelming military superiority, the Galactic Council would be dissolved and replaced by human administrators who would govern each species according to their capabilities and usefulness. All military forces would be placed under human command, with alien crews serving as support. Personnel for human officers. Prime Kristark Nulvani tried to maintain some dignity as she reviewed the surrender document. "Surely we can reach some form of partnership arrangement," she pleaded, "where both humans and Council species benefit from cooperation rather than domination." Admiral Williams smiled with the cold satisfaction of someone whose victory was absolute and undeniable. "You had 20 years to consider partnership," he replied. "Instead, you chose exile and punishment. Now you will experience the consequences of teaching humanity to survive without your approval or assistance. The economic terms were devastating to the former council powers. All trade routes would be managed by human corporations, with alien species paying tribute for the privilege of using space lanes that humanity now controlled. Mining rights, manufacturing facilities, and research installations would transfer to human ownership, with former council members working as contractors under human supervision. Dr. Kevin Hayes, now humanity's Minister of Alien Affairs, explained the biological monitoring requirements that would ensure compliance. Every council species would submit to genetic analysis and medical examination to identify weaknesses that could be exploited if they attempted rebellion. The data would be used to develop targeted weapons and control methods for each alien population. We spent our isolation years learning everything about your physiology, psychology, and social structures, Hayes informed the terrified council members. We know how to disable your nervous systems, disrupt your breeding cycles, and manipulate your brain chemistry. Resistance would not just be futile, it would be suicide. The technological demands were perhaps the most humiliating aspect of the surrender terms. All council species would be required to share their complete scientific databases, manufacturing techniques, and research discoveries with humanity. In return, humans would selectively share obsolete technology that kept alien civilizations dependent but never competitive. General Paul Martinez outlined the military occupation structure that would enforce human dominance throughout the galaxy. Human bases would be established on every council world, with occupation forces equipped with weapons that alien science could not understand or counter. Local security would be provided by alien troops under human command, ensuring that former council species participated in their own subjugation. Your military forces will serve as auxiliary units in the Human Colonial Defense Force, Martinez announced. You will fight when we command, where we command, and how we command. Your soldiers will die for human interests, and your families will thank us for the privilege. The cultural integration requirements completed humanity's transformation from exiled outcasts to galactic masters. Human language would become mandatory in all educational systems. Human history would be taught as the pinnacle of civilization, and human values would replace the collaborative ideals that had once guided council society. Captain Danny Foster, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, delivered the final condition that sealed the council's fate. Every species in this galaxy will broadcast the same message to all their colonies and settlements, he announced. Humanity is not your equal and never was. We are your superiors in every way that matters. You had the opportunity to work with us as partners, and you chose to treat us as prisoners. Now you will serve as our subjects for as long as your civilizations exist. The broadcast went out simultaneously to every world in the galaxy, transmitted through networks that humans had been infiltrating for years. The message was clear and undeniable. The age of council rule was over, and humanity's dominion had begun. The ceremony concluded with a demonstration of power that eliminated any lingering thoughts of resistance. 3 human dreadnoughts, each larger than entire council battle fleets, emerged from stealth directly above the council homeworld. Their weapons charged with energy that made the system's primary star appear dim by comparison, while their hulls displayed armor that could withstand anything in the alien arsenal. The aliens who had once dismissed humanity as too chaotic for civilization now understood the truth that would define their future. Chaos had not been humanity's weakness. It had been their greatest evolutionary advantage. 20 years of isolation had allowed them to perfect the art of controlled destruction, strategic thinking, and technological innovation that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever produced. The council that had demanded humanity's exile now knelt before the species they had created through abandonment. The silence they had imposed as punishment had become the crucible that forged humanity into the galaxy's new masters, and the mercy they now begged for would be granted only in the form of servitude to their former victims.